Clark County School District. Nice to see you, Kat. Thank you.
And I'm Darlene Anderson. I moved to Nevada about 3 years ago, but I was really involved in public education in Sacramento, and I understand what's happening here.
Thank you.
And I'm Amanda Teresa. I'm also with CCSD. I'm a coordinator for our early childhood department.
I'll jump right in. I'm Dana Leffler. I'm the special education coordinator in Nye County School District.
I'm Ashley Price. I am a program professional with the Office of Inclusive Education.
Good afternoon, I'm Sherry Bingham. I am a stakeholder for the state of Nevada, and I'm retired from NDE. I was the previous 619 coordinator before Dana.
Good afternoon, I'm Valerie Wright, and I'm a 44-year veteran of public, private, and all other kinds of education. I taught in the school district and retired after 10 years, and have been a tutor and consultant for students, parents, and professionals, licensed professionals.
I'm Rachel Nelson. I was a Clark County School District employee for 12 years, 8 of those years in different early childhood programs. I am now a parent of early childhood children in the district.
I'm not sure if there's any other parents or LEA representatives out there, but my name is Julie Bowers. I am the current director of the Office of Inclusive Education at the Nevada Department of Education. And I want to formally thank everybody for being here today, for giving us your time and your expertise as we make these important decisions about our targets for the next 5 years. And we will continue to thank you throughout this process for giving so freely of your time. We know that you have lots to do during your day, and we really do appreciate you taking the time to work with us on this. So I think Catherine is still out there that needs to introduce herself, so I will turn it over to her now. And if there's anybody else that has not had a chance to introduce themselves, please wave your hand or let us know you're out there.
So hi everybody, I'm Catherine Fusser. I'm the data manager for the Office of Inclusive Ed, and as Julie mentioned, thank you again for all your support and contributions, and I look forward to our time together over the next few meetings, so it'll be great. And I'm going to run this slideshow, so Kat's going to give me cues when to do the slides.
Hi, can you guys hear me? I think.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Anna Binder. As I think a few of you know, I volunteered for the Special Education Advisory Committee. And so at our last meeting, when you guys introduced these panels, I reached out to Miss Anderson, Miss Drummond, and Miss Wright to send in to be here with us today, because as I advocate out in the community, they're the 3 top special education people that I know of. So I'm very happy that they're here with us today, and I look forward to what we're going to learn.
Thank you for that. Is there anyone else that we may have missed? Okay, there's a star there just on Danine's name, just because she's not able to participate today, but she is going to be watching the playback. And I had a few people send emails saying I may be late or I may have to leave early, and that's okay. Everything will be recorded, so you'll be able to get caught up.
Please, let's get caught up.
Okay, so we're gonna go start with some norms. Oh, Catherine, could you go to the next slide? got to get used to that. Thank you. Okay, so our group norms. It is to participate in the meeting by using various Teams features. So please use the hand. If you have a question, you can use the chat. Julie's going to assist with that. And then if you'd like to use your video or not, that's your choice. I know you can manage all of the technology we have around. I've tried to silence things like my watch. So hopefully I'll limit my distractions as well. And then it's important to be genuine about your feelings and the challenges that we face. In the beginning, I will be giving you a lot of information. In this first part of today's presentation, it's a lot of information. And we just want to presume positive intent for everyone. I know we're all here for different reasons, but we all still want to be open-minded and we all want to value each other. Another good reference there is to seek to understand and be understood. And then I did not give you any information to read ahead of today's meeting. I know some of you were asking, but I will share some of the PowerPoint today. So if you'd like to look deeper at some of the graphs, you'll be able to do that. Okay, next slide. Thank you. So our meeting goals, we're going to focus on 4 specific indicators. Right now, I'm just going to use the numbers, but I will go into more detail about them. We have 4 indicators to focus on: 6, 7, 11, and 12. We will be setting baselines and targets, and then we will also be providing a rationale as to why we chose those baselines and those targets. And then we will also talk about some improvement strategies. Next slide. Okay, so what is the SPP APR? This stands for State Performance Plan Annual Performance Report, and it's used to evaluate our state's efforts in implementing the requirements of IDEA. So I will let you, if you'd like to take a couple minutes to read the slide.
Includes indicators that measure child and family outcomes and other indicators that measure the compliance with the requirements of IDEA. A state is required to submit a performance plan with the measurable, rigorous targets, at least 6 every year.
Do we have any questions so far? Are we ready for the next slide?
Oh, are we ready for the next slide? Because really, I have never seen Nevada's plan with rigorous.
Oh, 1 second. I see a 1.
So the Office of Special Education, OSEP, uses the information from the state.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for that, Anna Maria.
And ARP information.
Usually I would never have someone, I hate reading slides to people, but in the virtual world, it's a little different. Okay, we're good. Great. Thank you. Next slide.
Next slide.
Thank you. So within the SPP APR, Part B, which is what we focus on, there are 17 different indicators. And because it is so small, this is something that I did share for you in the Strong Start channel. We are focusing, once again, we're focusing on indicator 6, which is preschool environments, indicator 7, which is preschool outcomes, indicator 11, which is child find, and indicator 12, which is early childhood transition. So we're going to go into the very specific details about just those 4 in our group. Next slide. Oh, Julie, I'm so sorry. I see your hand up.
Well, that's okay. Thanks, Kat. I just wondered if you had reached out to our Director of Related Services. Right now, we don't have a Child Find Coordinator, but if you had you reached out to our Director of Related Services who oversees Child Find, because I think it would be important that someone is here for that, especially for indicator 6. And I can give you that information in an email.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, I'll have to follow up on that when we talk about 11, because you're right. That would be
6 and 11, yes.
an important person.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Well, they just hired a coordinator, but that person does not start for 2 more weeks or a week and a half. But they do have a director of related services that oversees it at this point. So I'll follow up with an email with both information on both people for you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And I think I might have seen another question in the chat as well. By race. Today, the data that we're sharing is not disaggregated by race, but we will be able to provide more data pieces. So when you want to see something disaggregated more, we will write it down, and then hopefully, or we will get you that data, but it won't be right now. Okay, so the fine print about the SPP APR. Okay, so the proposed revisions to the Part B SPP APR go into effect with the state's FFY 2018 to be submitted in February 2022. So it's just quite a large package, and it's always a little bit behind with our data. Catherine, would you like to add some more?
Just the every 6 years or so, OSEP comes out with a new SPP APR package. They do some tweaks and additions. A lot of the indicators may stay the same. This package is really the emphasis has been put on parent involvement and stakeholder engagement in setting rigorous yet achievable targets. And so that's what we're doing. And this is just started, in like the first it's federal fiscal year 2020. So the data gets submitted starting February 2022 is when this new package will start. So.
But this is Sherry Bingham, but that is school data from school year 2021, correct?
In some of the indicators, yes. In the indicators of this group, correct. Yeah. Graduation rates, post-secondary outcomes, things like some of that the year is a little lagged. But yes. So yeah, it's school year 2021 data gets reported February 2022. Yeah.
This is Julie. I would just add to, I think we talk about it in maybe a slide coming up too, that this is one of 5 groups that are meeting on indicators. So all of the other indicators are being worked on separately in different groups. And then all of this information will be taken back to it'll go back to our SEAC committee as well to review once we have, each of the subgroups have submitted their targets. So I just wanted to make sure you understood that you were part of a bigger project and that you're just looking at these indicators specifically.
Thank you for that information, Julie. Or yeah, we got 2 Julies here, don't we? Julie Casper, would you like to add to that? Okay, you're good. Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So just a piece of this package, one of the updates in this package is that having stakeholder groups like this, that we want to have input because parents do play a critical role in their children's education. And the community members play a critical role in the community's education. Okay. Next slide. Okay, so this gives you some information that is required for target setting. OSEP, which is the Office of Special Education Programs, they will set targets for indicators 11 and 12. And some other measuring methods will not change. That would be for indicators 7, 11, and 12. But for those of you who are well versed in this and you've been doing this a while, indicator 6 has changed. So we will be highlighting that change and talking more about it. Next slide. The mechanisms for soliciting broad stakeholder input on the state targets and the SPP APR and any subsequent revisions that the state has made to those targets, develop and implement of indicator 17 is the state's systemic improvement plan. So once again, it is required that we have stakeholder involvement. And last week, sorry, I have a fly in my room, in my office. Last week, as I was meeting with other 619 coordinators in a conference, I found out about a lot of states who were recording this and then just giving surveys, which is fine. That's another way of doing it. But I'm excited to hear all about your input in our stakeholder group. Okay, next slide. So earlier you may have seen at that slide how things were organized. It said like state education agencies, stakeholder, parents. That's because of the pieces that are required. We want to make sure that we have a large variety of statewide community members and various stakeholders. Thank you. Next slide. Oops, I'm digging away over there. And then after we do work on these indicators and we do find baselines and targets, all of this information, it will be shared publicly. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so this is some of the pieces that Julie alluded to previously. In order for our group to meet, there's been a lot of internal tasks and a lot of different logistics in the Office of Inclusive Education. So some of these stakeholder groups have already occurred. Of course, I didn't come on board until September. Next slide. Thank you. But here you can see all of the different indicator groups. And I believe ours is the last one. There may be one other one that still has one more meeting, but I believe ours is the last group. Next slide. Thank you. So this is just showing you all of the different indicators and the groups that we were working in. Next slide. Okay, so here we have a summary of all of our indicators. So 6A actually has 6A through C, which is preschool environments, and we will be setting our targets and baseline. Indicator 7, that one's preschool outcomes, is actually 7A, B, and C. Once again, we will be setting our targets. And then indicator 11, this one is the one about child find. The target is set, but we will be having a discussion on some of the data and some of the improvement strategies. And then that's similar with indicator 12, early childhood transitions. OSEP, or the Office of Special Education Programs, has already set the target, but we are going to look at the data and we will talk about some improvement strategies. Next slide. So this is just even more detailed of everything that we're going to talk about. So I'm going to ask that we do our very best to stay on topic, because I know when I show you some graphs, you may have other questions, and your questions are relevant. We want to hear your input. If it's off topic, we may write it down and get back to you later if that's what we need to do. So just a reminder, we have a lot to go over in 3 meetings. Next slide. Oh, here is where I wanted to ask if there were any general questions before we go more into target setting.
I have a question.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Great. So, under Child Find, the requirement is to the state, and the state has a responsibility for the number of children statewide that would need additional services for behavior transition, and all that data is supposed to be collected and should be in a public place. But I looked at the ARP money and what was released, and they said that they wanted the civil rights data. And there are a number of schools in Clark County that chose not to implement that data. So, as for the number of children who are actually being assessed for early start and the actual age of the children when they begin the educational journey, but this willful defiance is out of control in this state. And the inability for the engagement for families who look like me is real. So it's not happening. And the people who were in charge of it happening, well, they were qualified individuals. And it really hurt my heart to hear the women who were testifying, the teachers at the school board meeting, because of the requirements for the data and the analysis of the data that determines all children have access. But it's not easy work, and it never has been easy work, and they're not doing it. So I'm wondering, is this something that's going to happen this year? Because it's never happened here in Clark County. And the access for the African American children is devastating because of the violence that's in that community that's unhuman. And that's why I filed the complaint. You ladies, I know everybody knows my name because I had a blessing to grow up with my children in the public education system in Sacramento County. And my youngest, they said, was severely mentally retarded, communication handicap, and would not benefit from public education, but he graduated with a one-on-one aid and a laptop and above proficient. And his safety is at risk because, yes, he is in the spectrum of autism. But there's so many things that happen here, and a lot of legal things are involved with prohibiting children from benefiting from basic opportunities. And I don't understand what's going on, but I do know that this is 2020. And it's our blessing to look at this system and really align the services for all children. And thank you guys for letting me talk.
Thank you, Darlene, for that input. I would add that as Kat goes through the information for setting these targets, I think that some of the concerns that you have would be part of the discussion as we look towards those strategies that we want to do to improve our outcomes for these indicators. So we will let Kat move forward and present us the data that we have so far so that we can have those discussions about setting those targets.
Yeah, I see Anna's hand is up as well.
Yeah, sorry, thank you. This is why I emailed ahead of time and asked if we could get a copy of this, because I literally have to visualize all of this. So I am writing as fast as I can so I can make my accompanying notes. So how long before I can print a copy of this?
Are you asking for the PowerPoint information?
Yes.
I would think that, Catherine, could you email her a copy of the PowerPoint now? Or it would come right after the meeting. since she's in, I know she can't do two things on her computer at once. It won't let her take it out of the presentation and email it all at the same time. So I apologize for offering that at this point, but we will get the information out following the meeting for you. And again, today, as Kath mentioned, a lot of it is information giving. And then you're going to have that information between now and the next meeting to really review as we come back to hear further recommendations.
This is Shannon. I'd love to have a copy of the PowerPoint as well.
And part of the reason that we don't send it out ahead of time is that we want to be able to thoroughly go through it so that you're reading it in the right way and not misinterpreting any of the data. So once we've gone through it, we always feel better about giving it to you, knowing that we've explained it the best that we can, so that when you're reading it, you know exactly what you're looking at.
That's great. Thank you.
Was there another question that you had, Anna?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think we're ready to move on to targets. Okay, next slide. Okay, so what are the targets? What do I keep talking about? So targets identify a level of progress or performance expected for an objective. And we want them to be rooted in and built on the past experience when possible. So this may be analytically grounded, but it also we want it to be satisfactory to you, to our stakeholders. And target setting is the process a state uses. And we may use a variety of target setting. Just because we used something with one indicator doesn't mean we have to do the exact same thing with the next indicator. But we do have to explain the rationale. Next slide. And this is just some various methods for setting targets. We can do something as easy as just an eyeball estimation using educated guesses. Sometimes we may want to look at trend lines, try and make some assumptions or guesstimations for future years, and then select from a trend line. We may want to look at future growth or figure growth or change from year to year. And then we also may want to just use percentage points. We could also increase by certain percentage points. And another method is to start with the end in mind. Think about where we want to be at the end of the SPP. I think I heard some dings going off there in the chat. So I'm just going to take a quick peek at that.
Kat, one of the questions is about the information. So just for the group, we will send out all the information that we present at this meeting to you following this meeting today. The recording of the meeting will also be available for you to review as well. And then Darlene asked a question, what do you have to work with? That way we all have the data. And I would add the same, that we will be sending out to everybody any additional information that's requested through this meeting, or we will present it at the next meeting depending on what it is that people are asking us to present.
I had a question because, I mean, just because you're looking at the data globally at all of the local schools, the schools have the personal responsibility to ensure that they're meeting those targets. And the way that Clark County changed their requirements that the state had already given them and that they had approved, they changed all of the data collection and then they wrote in their own. And that was just about feeling good. It wasn't about actual meaningful measuring the data to receive the money. And I'm just wondering who was overseeing that piece where they struck their obligation to collect the disaggregated data. It's exactly what was negotiated with the Office of Civil Rights when you guys did that 2014 thing under the consensus decree, under that little consent decree, that you guys said, yes, we'll do all of this. And then that board in 2019 struck all of that. And then they wrote in their feel good stuff. So I'm just trying to understand, what are you looking at in regards to the data that you're trying to present to the feds? I want to understand that.
And hopefully as we work through the data, we will show you where we collect that data, remembering that this is a state level collection of data, so it is not just about one district in particular, and we need to keep that in mind as we talk about all of this data, that this is to establish the requirements that the state of Nevada has for the federal government. Further conversations will be how the state collects that data from the districts, and that is not part of our discussion today. Today, we are setting the targets for what we will report to the federal government, and as we work through the process, we will continue to determine how we collect that data from the districts within our state processes.
Okay, so
I'm just trying to keep us on track for today because we have a lot to get through
but
first.
I'm going to say this because your Part B person already said that the state is only required to provide a sampling of data, but the data that demonstrates that all children have access is required by the state. And so the state Department of Education has an obligation to support these schools to ensure that they're getting the data in, but I'm not seeing that effort, and that is my concern.
And as I mentioned, that will be part of the process after we set the targets to make sure that we are collecting at the state level clean and accurate data from the districts. But that is not our task for today. Today is to determine what we will be reporting to the federal government from the state level. And then again, in future discussions, we will work through how we collect that data from the districts to ensure that we're meeting those requirements. And again, today is going to be a lot of information that you're going to get, and I know that there will be more questions and more data that you will want to see, but we have to work through the process from the beginning in order to get to that end. It's sort of a systematic approach that we have, and while we will be keeping track of concerns as we go along, we just want to make sure that we get through this. We have a very limited time, 3 meetings to set these targets, and we want to make sure that we get this piece done and we can make determinations about additional meetings to figure other steps out once we've completed this task. So I turn it back over to you, Kat, to get us started at looking at those indicators and the data that we have right now to start making the targets.
Okay, thank you. Next slide. Just a couple of remembers. Targets, they can remain the same several years in a row, but they have to show improvement over baseline in the end. Next slide. Okay, so now we're going to go deeper into indicator 6, educational environments. Next, yeah, you can go one more slide. Thank you. Okay, so indicator 6 is made up of 3 different parts. It includes children ages 3 through 5 who receive services through early childhood special education. The educational environment tells us where they're spending their time during the week and where special education services are provided. A refers to the percent of children with IEPs who attend a regular early childhood program and receive the majority of their special education services in that regular program. B is the percent of early childhood special ed children who attend a special education classroom or program. And then C is the percent of children who receive special education services in their home. So oftentimes I say 6A regular, 6B separate, and 6C home to help us distinguish. Next slide. So the data source, it is from the 618 count. So that means that on October 1st of every year, we get this data. Catherine, would you like to add anything to that?
Sorry, I had to find the mute. Yeah, it's so October 1st is our statewide count of all students within the state. It's through our Office of Accountability that runs it. Districts, we take they call a snapshot of the student information system. And then the districts have time to ensure that all the data is as accurate as they know. This information, as we said, it's for all students, but for us, we collect students age 3 through 21 who have current eligibility, current IEPs, and are enrolled in our school districts. And from that, we submit a file to the federal government. It's called EdFax File 089. And that information is publicly available on the federal government IDEA data sites, as well as it's posted on our NDE sites for child count. But essentially, that's how the information comes to us from the districts, and then we submit what they send us off to the feds.
Thank you, Catherine.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the bottom, you see some information there about how this indicator has changed. Because beginning with the 2021 school year, states include 5-year-old children with disabilities if they're enrolled in preschool programs. If the 5-year-old child with a disability is enrolled in kindergarten, then that is in indicator 5. So that's the shift. We are only looking at 3, 4, and 5-year-olds with IEPs in preschool programs. Yes, Julie.
Yeah, I just want to clarify that. So I know right now that, if they're 5 on or before September 30th, they're kindergarten age. But if they enroll on October 1st and they're a 5-year-old for this school year, they're preschool, right? So is that small number? Maybe we have 12 that turn 5 on October 1st who would be preschool because they missed the kindergarten cutoff. So for this school year, do those 10 or 12 that have that birthday on October 1st, since that's the count draw, would we include them then on our parts or our indicator 6 this year, or will it move up for the 20 school year for the data we're reporting? Did I make myself?
Yeah. So if it's what they are on October 1st, the snapshot is taken at 2 a.m. on the 2nd, October 2nd. So it includes the full day of the 1st. So on the 1st, if they're enrolled in pre-K and their age is 5, then they're included here in the early childhood count. If they, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's got October 1st date.
Right.
Any districts out there, please change your annual IEP meeting to outside of October 1st. Because it's a switch, right? It goes, and then all of a sudden on October 1st, they, if they're in kindergarten, they get a different LRE code.
This year, though, they would not be in kindergarten on October if they turn 5 on October 1st, because the state cutoff is on or before September 30th.
Right. This year. Future years is different, right?
Starting in 2022. Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
Anna has her hand up.
You guys actually brought up a really good point, because even if they didn't hit kindergarten for this school year, the rule changes for next year. So I guess maybe want to think out loud that I want to hope we're not missing like a whole year of kids when the law changes that you can't enroll your kid unless they turn 5 before the first day of school next year.
Yeah, Anna, so you're right. There is a new bill that was passed this past session that changes the age for kindergarten. They must be age 5 before the first day of school, which, as we know in our state, that can vary from mid-July to the end of August. Yeah, moving forward, there is guidance that was sent out from the superintendent of the state. We can send that through this group as well. Basically, if the student is already currently enrolled this school year, because what it'll start to happen, right? They won't be old enough to go into the first grade, right? So those kids are going to be like grandfathered in. They're in school and they're moving forward. So yeah, right. We want to make sure we don't miss anybody. But I'll make a note we can add that to the Teams chat or email. Does everybody have access to the Teams channel and the so that if we post information there, you can get that? And if not, we can, again, try to email stuff. Okay.
Public information.
Okay, next slide, please, when you're ready. So this is just a Nevada decision tree. I know there are a lot of previous and current well, I guess not current, but lots of previous teachers. And this is part of how we gather the data. So for example, students in a separate class or a separate facility would have a different code than a student who is in a regular early childhood program. So this is just how the data is collected, how we determine where the child is. And I want to make sure I said that right. It's not how you determine where to put the kid, it's how we determine what the name of the code is for the child. Next slide.
Next slide.
I think it's the start of our data slide.
Yeah, let's look at.
Okay, so you don't even have to read this. I know it's a lot of information. It's a lot of numbers, and it's probably small for you. But I just want you to see that this is the data that we're going to talk about. So we are going to look at quite a few different graphs, and I'm going to show you what may be an option for our targets, but you may also say, no, you want to look at something different, and that's fine. Mm-hmm. Next slide.
Nothing real. Telly precision.
Okay. Oh yeah, that probably is small for you guys.
Precision. I mean, it's
organize myself here. Okay, so this shows you indicator 6A, 6B, and 6C, how Nevada has performed over time. Mm-hmm. So at the bottom of the screen, you see the years. This is from 2016 up into 2021.
0.06.
The blue shows you 6A, that's the regular program. And you see that that line increases because according to our state improvement plan, we want to increase inclusion. So we want that blue line to move up.
They got to increase inclusion.
The orange one, that is 6B, that is our separate programs. So we're looking for that line to decrease. So as you can see over time, that orange line decreases. And then the one at the bottom, that gray one, I apologize, you may not be as clear to you as it was on my Excel, because that's kind of blends. So it looks like a flat line, but it is not a flat line. They are just small numbers. So we are going to go through each of these in detail,
No, that's what. Look,
but I will
detail
wait
is.
if there are any questions so
Oh, there's no
far.
questions because that doesn't make any sense. You can't even see the numbers.
Okay, next slide.
You know, people get paid for this. Now, know that, right?
So this is just 6A, regular pre-K. At the bottom, you see, once again, you see the same years. And then on the left, you see the percentage.
See, this is the percentage.
The blue line shows that increase. So we increased our inclusion. The numbers on the blue line represent the number of children. So you can see the number of children increased until after the pandemic, we had a decline. That's not the right word, in enrollment. Like the enrollment went low.
Happened during pandemic. Then
so that's why you see, even though in 2019, that data piece, it was 1959 students, we increased inclusion because the number of students overall changed. So here you really see how important it is to understand when we collect our data, because we collected October 1st, 2019, and then March 2020 came along. And then we collected again October 1st, 2020. Any questions? Okay, yes, Shannon.
This is statewide. It's not Clark County only.
That mute button will get me. So the percentage on the side, is that percentage of inclusion or percentage of students?
Thank you. That is percentage of the students in inclusion,
that means
only for 3, 4, and 5-year-olds with IEPs in pre-K programs.
So that would be the explanation. Even though 2021 had a lower amount of students, the percentage is still higher.
Really?
Because that's percentage of kids that are enrolled.
Yes.
Okay, I'm with you.
Yes, great. I love it.
We get paid for this now.
Any other questions before we go to the next slide?
Move on to the next slide.
Okay, next slide. And this shows you the same thing again. It's just in a different type of graph, right? Now we're looking at a bar graph. So it's 3, 4, and 5 in pre-K only.
That doesn't take in.
Shannon, did you have another question, or is your hand just up from
enrolled in
before?
pre-K, or all of the children in early start? We don't even have that number.
Thank you. Okay.
This is the one
Next slide.
with behavior plans, I guess. Oh, look.
Okay. So at the bottom, once again, you can see the years, and on the left, you can see the percentages. So this is 3, 4, 5-year-olds with IEPs in pre-K only. So that's the blue bar. And that gray line that goes across shows you targets. These were the targets that were previously set. But there's a few more caveats here, right? Because of that change. So when those targets were first made, we were making targets for 3, 4, 5-year-olds with IEPs in pre-K and kindergarten. And this is extracted data. So as what you're looking at, those blue bars, that's our pre-K students. So even without that those kindergartners that we were counting, you can see in 2016-17, in 2017-18, you can see how close we were to those targets. And actually, with kindergarten, we made those targets, which I'll show you next. But then you can see that in the next couple of years, we started to exceed our targets. So we met those targets. And then we have that change in calculation. And then here we have our next set of data. Catherine, if you can show me yeah, that one. Okay. So here it's the same information. We're still looking at 6A. You see the years at the bottom, and you see the percentages on the left. And the 6A shows you the regular pre-K students. But previously, since we were also using kindergarten, that's where that orange bar comes in, and it shows you how we were doing against targets, how the actual data was doing with our targets. But now with the shift in calculation, with 2018 and above, we have once again exceeded those targets as a state. And then of course the line stops because we haven't made the targets yet. As you guys digest some of that, I'm just going to look at the chat.
Kat, there's some questions about the data itself, and I would add that it is not that we don't have the data that breaks this down into disability categories and or race categories. It is just not needed in this discussion today because it is not how we report that information at the federal level. So we can look to get different sets of data as we make decisions about the, again, the strategies that we want to use to better meet the targets that we set. But we are looking at the parameters in which the feds are asking us to report the data in terms of the data sets that we're looking at today. So as we end the conversation today, we will ask everybody's input as to other data sets that they would like to see, and we can bring them forward in the next meeting. Hopefully that answers your question, Darlene.
Thank you, Julie. If there's no other questions, we can go to the next slide. Okay, this one. I like this one. I got to read my my note though. Okay, so this is called a scatter plot. And at the bottom, you see the number of students, and on the left, you see the percent, because this is inclusion by district. So each dot represents a district. And the line that goes across, that orange line, represents possibly a target. So any district or any blue dot below that orange line would not meet that target. Any district above that line right now would be meeting or exceeding the target. And you see that little red box in the left corner? Those are districts that are, they would not make the target, but their count is so small that the data wouldn't be, like the end count wouldn't even give us any information. It's 0. And I want to say there's a couple districts in that little square. Questions? Okay. Next slide. And then this slide just is a starting point for you guys to have a conversation about some target options. So the blue bars that you see, this is the same information about 6A. You see how we've increased our inclusion every year. At the bottom of the screen, you see the years. And then on the left, you see the percent of students in regular early childhood special ed. And then target A, it's just an option. That's the green line. And that one starts with baseline 1920 data. And then it stays stagnant for a couple years through 2022. And then it slowly increases. Target option B, that's the orange line. And that starts with 2021 baseline data. And it's kind of hard to see because it with that gray line. It's kind of behind that gray line, but it stays stagnant and then slowly increases. And then target C, this one is a little bit more aggressive. It uses 2021 data as baseline data, and then it increases to 44% by 2025. These are just options because it's just a starting point for you guys. It's okay to combine some of this or to say you don't like these options. So I'm going to open it up to you guys. And tell me what you think about the options, please. Go ahead, Anna. Start us off.
Okay. So C is in home, and I just know. So I live in Clark County, so I know that.
Wait, hold on. In this graph that I'm showing you, the target C, it's. I guess maybe I should have said option C.
Oh, I see. Okay, I thought you were doing A, B, and C. Okay, then never mind. I don't have a question.
I'm sorry. I know it's
okay. Okay, it's okay.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, and I moved my mouse. I guess the slide moves. Yeah, these are just, again, suggested targets to start off for inclusion rates that we want to increase. So we want to increase our inclusion rates, various different ways that we can do that, and our targets, and that, again, the requirement of we have to pick a year for baseline. Do we pick 2021, which was October 20, midstream pandemic, or do you pick pre-pandemic, which would have been October 2019, as kind of a baseline starting? And we have to show increase over baseline by the end of the package.
Okay, now I do have a question. So what I particularly see in our community is a lack of the community knowing that programs like Child Find exist. And then also sometimes hesitancy of office staff to encourage a parent. So like say I have like a first grader and I'm in the office with like my 4-year-old and somebody notices my 4-year-old's like nonverbal or has, you know, I don't know. I have 2 sons that are special education. So I catch things like that, like right off the bat. But I'm seeing like a hesitancy from just school staff being able to have like a dialogue with the parents that are presenting onto campus with younger siblings that may need services. And I actually have a very particular instance for like trying to get office staff to talk to that parent about that younger child. But we also have, I think as parents, and I know I had it when I was dealing with my first son, kind of still a stigma amongst like parental conversations that a lot of the time parents are still in denial that their children may or may not need like services. I do see that out on our parent pages a lot, you know, like moms coming in going, like my kid just got diagnosed with autism, like what do I do? And like just watching conversations like that being had. So as I'm looking at like this target data, like I think we could nail it if we were able to help increase those resources to kind of get to those categories and, you know, have a better dialogue with the community about it.
Thank you, Anna. I'm writing this down, and I think it could be a good place for some of our improvement strategies. I'm not sure who's next with the hands.
I think it was Dana or Shannon close to together raising their hand, and then Julie Casper again.
Well, I'll jump in. This is Dana. So I think that, in looking at the potential targets, I think they're appropriately aggressive, considering, where we've come from. I think they're appropriately aggressive and yet achievable. As far as the baseline, I think starting at 2019 would be appropriate, given that that was the last normal year that we've had. So I think that would probably be an appropriate baseline year to start from. That's my 2 cents. Next.
So this is Shannon, just a couple of clarifications. So the orange starting point, the option B for that baseline, is that under that 2021 school year? It's just underneath the gray?
Yes.
Okay. And from the 18-19 to the 19-20, there's a significant amount of a jump. Was that, can we attribute that to kind of the change in that cutoff and that count, or is there something else that we can identify that happened during that time?
That's a great question, and I have a feeling there may be another expert in here that can explain that to us.
I'm happy to jump in with my
Please.
2 cents. This is Dana. So that the year, and that was a great observation, from 2018-19 to 19-20, there was some policy changes that occurred, and what we saw happen in our state was the ability for us to have what is kind of reverse inclusion classrooms. It was a change in a method that we could provide inclusive services. So many of the districts took advantage of that, and we saw the opportunities for students with disabilities. The opportunities increased by a significant amount, which allowed that growth to occur. So because of those opportunities, we saw more students being included in their preschool education.
Okay, and to follow up, just at the mercy of naivete, is that option saturated, or is there more growth within what we did at that point?
I don't have the answer to that. That would be more district by district. That option is still available. Julie Casper, I'm going to let you maybe jump on that, because you might know if it's saturated or not based on your numbers.
Sure. Well, that wasn't the reason I had my hand up, but I can definitely comment on that. So never saturated enough. I will tell you that right now. There's always opportunities to increase and increase and increase, and provide more opportunities for inclusive practices for pre-K students and general education opportunities for pre-K students. So yes, and are we planning on increasing next year? Absolutely, for the same purpose, to provide more inclusive opportunities than we have in the past. And in the past, we grow every single year, and we plan on doing the same thing for the 22-23 school year. And then just real quick, if I may, Ms. Binder, I appreciate and love the comment about Child Find. So just so you know, so this all starts with the 0 to 3 with a part C, and getting that information out there for to provide early intervention services. So I do know that within CCSD, the Child Find department has brochures at hospitals, at private child care centers, should be at the schools as well, and doctors' offices. And we're working with well, I'm working with the Child Find teams right now to increase that outreach, to make Child Find just to get that outreach more, get it out there so we can find more children that may need services. So just so you know, we are definitely working on that, and actually meeting about it within the next week or so on how we can increase those outreach opportunities.
Yeah, and the only reason I ever found out about it was with my second son. When we met, he had to have a surgery on his head and then a helmet when he was an infant, and the neurologist told me about it. I didn't even know about it with my other son.
Wow. So yeah, so again, we do have that in, like I said, the brochures and everything in those doctors' offices, in hospitals, in all of that to help with that outreach as well. And then so we can start evaluating here in the district at age about 2.5 for children, but they can't start school with us until, of course, they turn 3. Correct. Absolutely correct. So, but we work very closely with Part C service providers, and Kat coming into it, and Dana in the past, and Sherry in the past. No, Justin Clark, we probably through Part C services, not counting that pandemic year, provided, I want to say, I think the highest year, it was close to 1,500 children that we evaluated just coming through Part C services. And that's not even, I mean, that's just through those Part C services that receive those services. We evaluated numerous more than that. I mean, more than double of that, if not triple of that, to provide services and determine whether a child was eligible or not. But great question, and thank you for addressing it. I appreciate it. Sorry, I'm done.
No, you're great. I think we have a few more people with their hands up. So whoever wants to.
I think you had Rachel and then Sherry. So Rachel, you're up.
Sorry, unmute and on camera, I guess, here. I just kind of wanted to go back to, I think Anna started the conversation too, but about, the targets. And I do understand wanting the targets to be achievable, and especially with kind of the data coming from the pandemic year and whatnot between those, between that. But my question was, with maybe like new legislation coming, these targets are going to be over the next 6 years. If there's going to be some sort of access towards universal preschool, that means, there could be an influx of so many students, and then teachers hopefully will be doing their due diligence and seeing, making referrals to the ones who might need special education services. I personally was wondering if that target could be a little higher, especially because of that. We don't know, and I totally know that we don't know how that'll look, especially in, I'm in Clark County, so that's what I think of. Our large districts already, as Julie addressed, are adding programs every year. We're always getting more students, but if it's something that's going to be universal, then that can be a lot more students, and then possibly, maybe increasing that target. That was my thought.
Yeah. I'm sure that Kat is writing things down to take note of that. And I would also add that, we can be aggressive in our target setting. And again, we at NDE are neutral parties here. We're asking you to make the big decisions. But there is no limit to exceeding any expectation that we have of ourselves. So I think I would just caution to be realistic, but knowing that if we exceed our targets, we are only, showing that growth as well. So it's not going to miss that growth if it happens. It's just going to show up by exceeding the targets that we've set.
That's true. Okay.
And you guys did say we do this yearly though too. So I know like this SPP right now that we're working on is for the next 6 years, but then we can potentially maybe next year look at the APR, right? Yeah, APR. to see how that grows in the event we do wind up taking on the universal pre-K, correct, I think?
This is Catherine. I'll chime in. That is correct. So we are going to kind of put forth the targets for the full package. And then every year we do have an opportunity to kind of go in and look and see, you know, like, right, massive policy changes in the state are moving stuff in a direction, then we may want to readjust targets accordingly, especially with especially again if we have big policy changes that that have an impact, or either way, you know, right? And so and you know, also with this this age change now for allowing in kindergarten, you know, so there's different things. I think also, again, as you mentioned, some suggestions for making sure parents know more about placement categories, and again, working to have parents and teachers and staff work together to have more inclusive decisions and practices. So I think there's, I think that's another thing to think about. It's like, yes, let's set some rigorous and achievable targets, and let's come back to them. Let's just not come back to them in another 6 years and look at the information again. So yeah. And Sherry has her hand up, patiently waiting.
Very quick comment. We're looking at the baselines being established either from the 1920 or 2021 data. And another option that OSEP and the guidance that I've looked at says you can also average some of those years, last 3 or last 5. And so that would be even a lower baseline if we were to do that. And then, you know, if I'm not saying I even prefer that. I'm just saying it's another option, I think, isn't it?
So the baseline has to be a year chosen, but what we can do is we can take averages to start the target. You know, you can start a target, you know, and work that way. But we have looked at this averaging for the baseline has come up several times because it kind of like, oh, it makes sense. Let's start at a average. But what we're finding is that you have to select a year as a data point, and then when we kind of come like, where do we want our targets to start or end? You could take that average and then go from there. Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying.
I have a quick question on the target A, B, and C. Do you have the percentage of increase of what those are?
Yes.
Because I agree. I think going from the 1920 as the baseline as the last, quote, closest typical year that we've had is best, but knowing that the legislature and the accountability is going to change as far as the cutoffs and whatnot. I agree with Rachel to keep it rigorous and make sure that we, you know, shoot high. Oh, geez, sorry. But, you know, like you said, Catherine, we can always exceed, but I'm wondering the 1920, the green is a little bit lower of the achievement and an under. So I'm just wondering, are those all target lines, option lines similar in the percentage of growth, I guess?
Yeah, I was just trying to post it or share it nicely with you, and I copied it so I could put it in like our chat and it doesn't look readable. But so target A, let me tell you the percentages. It starts at 39.13, and then by 2025 it goes up to 41%. And then target B, that one starts with baseline 2021, which is 40.29, and it goes up to 42% by 2025. And then the target C is at 2021 baseline, which is 40.29, and then goes up to 44 by 2025. So that one is the one that's most aggressive and goes up almost 1 percentage point every year. And I can also try and put this in a nicer, so I can share all the graphs with you and all of the data behind the graph. I'll have to see if I can do it in Excel or share it in the conversation, just so you can see all the pieces and it looks right, because when I copy it over, it looks weird.
Okay, thanks. If we're moving on and be continuing this discussion, sorry, I would love to see us use that 2019, but that ending at 44. But I don't know. I'm new to the group and kind of new to the Strong Start, so I don't know if that would be too aggressive, or if we want to just maintain kind of the growth between the last 2 years that we have, and then try to exceed. I don't know, but just some thoughts.
Those are great thoughts. Thank you for sharing. I think Anna wanted to respond.
If Dana wanted to go first, that's fine. No, she said no. Just some thoughts. So I know we're not like making a decision. We're just discussing this right now. But as we move forward, I really want to see like the home data, because, like coming out of the pandemic, is this target option year, this was data collected as of October 1st, 2021, correct?
Yes, this
okay.
indicator.
Okay, so yeah, I would love to go forward, because we know as like here, our enrollment dropped, homeschooling increased, and, our community was definitely looking for, more different services than the regular pre-K.
Thank you, Anna. Looks like there's another hand up.
I get Rachel and Julie Casper have their hand up. And Dana, did you have your hand up at one point? And then
This is Julie. I'm good.
okay.
Yeah, sorry, I removed my hand.
Okay.
Okay, so it's 2:24 and it's important to respect your time. And Anna, what you just said is what I heard was maybe it would be beneficial to share more data and to see 6B and 6C before you guys make decisions and set targets for 6A. Is that correct? Okay. And then the other thing I was thinking was I could also get us started with a poll next session too, I guess, if you guys wanted to vote on things, but you don't have to do that. that way. And we can also change target A, B, and C. It doesn't have to be exactly how it is. Go ahead, Anna.
Sorry, I'm like clicking these buttons as quick as possible. It's just my really big concern is, post-pandemic, it's shaped the way that our societies are moving forward. So I think that data is very important because as we're seeing, obviously we have sections of the community that don't want to vaccinate, they don't want their kids in masks. I know we're not seeing like a huge mass exodus from that. I mean, we're already down. Clark County's already down, I think 18,000 students from 2019. But I just think as you're seeing a lot of families make choices for their families, I just think that data is really important, and it will be important even maybe when we look at next year to see the decisions that, parents are making for their children.
Yes, thank you for that. So I think that a good choice would be to, okay, I'm going to share, I'd like to get the data I'd like to share it out with all of you so you can see it. And then we'll come back. Our next meeting is on Tuesday. And then before we even make any decisions about option A, B, or C, or anything for target or baseline indicator A, we can go through 6B and 6C. And it sounds like you guys want to look at that data before the meeting. Is that a fair assessment?
And if I would add, sorry, this is Julie, I keep forgetting to turn my camera on. I would add that if you can put in the chat any specific data that you want to see. I know one of the things that you want to see is sort of the trajectories of this chart that we're looking at and those percentages of change in each of those targets. So I know Kat kind of went over them, with you, but to see, exactly how much of a percentage change that is over each year, we'll try to present it that way. And any additional data sets that you think would be helpful in making the decision, please understand that when we look at the percentage of students, each of those numbers or that percentage does represent a student who has a distinct disability category as well as other factors about that person. So we can look at that by those people, but we only have data that we have data on. We don't have data for kids who are missing from this group of students. So please understand that we can't give you information on kids that we don't have data for. But each of these, across the sets of data that we've given you represent an individual student who has distinct characteristics in other areas. It's just that it wasn't necessary to look at them from that perspective in order to look at this percentage of students that we're looking at. But it is certainly data that we would look at when we talk about the strategies and the improvement outcomes that we want to change, especially when we look at subpopulations of this group and sort of as Julie Casper alluded to and others, that there's work to be done at a lot of different levels, and we understand that. But right now, we have to look at it as this group of people that we're trying to improve outcomes for, and know that individually we have to do work within that group of students that we're talking about.
This is Valerie. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Valerie.
I'm just wondering if there are certain things that you see that may be causing the changes to occur in your data and for your percentage of participation to increase. Are you seeing more of a certain kind of qualifier that may be affecting your increase of numbers?
It's sort of hard to make sweeping notions about those increases because of sort of different factors that have happened at different times. However, I will add that the trajectory, especially starting if you look at 2016 to the 1920 school year, you saw significant increases across those years and that was the impact of sustained effort to improve outcomes for this population of kids. I think you would have seen that continued growth across the next school year. You saw a little bit in 2021, but I think we would have seen even more had we not been affected by the pandemic. And then I do think there's a consideration for legislation that passed in a couple of those years. So it's hard to make a determination of what factor has caused that. But I would say that the state's sustained effort from 2016 until 2020 and through the pandemic as well was showing that we had substantial growth across all of those years in outcomes for kids and in the inclusion rate. And, the interruption has caused us to, sort of take a step back and look at the data in a little bit different way. But I think we can presume that those significant growth would continue to happen as we go back to, as Shannon said, some sort of typical normalcy or a typical year growth. But, we were prior to the pandemic just seeing significant growth across each year that we had been working with districts across the state to improve inclusion rates. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but.
I was just wondering if you were seeing more of one qualifying identifier that made a child eligible, if you saw greater numbers in one category than another. Like maybe if there might have been something we could have done to maybe cause a little interference so that maybe things wouldn't get to that point where they were, not that we're trying not to get children to qualify, but is there anything that may have been done that could have offset some of those that became eligible to qualify for special services? And I'm just wondering is it population? Is it the situation with the pandemic? Is it home situation? Are there some things? I'm just wondering if you're seeing certain categories that may have caused your larger increase than others.
We could, Catherine, and maybe you could look at the different types of disability categories across those years in terms of enrollment and in the inclusive practices. I would say that the growth is primarily based on opportunities, right? And that was creating more opportunities for kids to participate in inclusive preschool settings across the state that showed that those huge amounts of growth, as well as the information going out to different community members and families about the opportunities available to kids. Because you have to have the programs for them to go into in order to see that growth. And that is what the sustained effort from the state was across those 5 years, was really increasing those opportunities and then increasing the outreach to bring those kids to those opportunities.
Thank you.
I just also, we can definitely pull some data. I will say that we just took the October 1, 2021 count. We will not have that information in time for this process. It doesn't get finalized until almost the end of the year. But our enrollment significantly dropped between 2019 and 2020. Overall in the state, but especially in this range of the 3 to 5 year old pre-Ks. And it could be that these, right, the families just removed to homeschool or private school situations and out of the public school system. So when I can show you some numbers, but I will put that little caveat on there. You're going to see a significant drop in a number between 1920 and 2021.
I'm just real quick. Are we including charter schools in this data, or is this strictly full public school?
Charter schools are public, and they're included in this data set. It does not include private schools. But it would include a student with a disability who is going to a private school that may still be receiving services from the public school system. So it would include those children as well.
And it doesn't include children who are qualified for free and reduced lunch at those charter schools. Also, the Title I dollars cover over there. And so, when you're looking at the federal dollars and the allocations, you're really just trying to assume that we have everybody on board to create access. I think my issue here is that I understand that there's a great disparity in the behaviors of children across Nevada. And for children who have not had early access, and there are no programs that are designed to support those children and their local communities when they come to school, it's terrorizing for a lot of people. And it's difficult because the requirement for that data has not changed for every student. And just trying to get around the access to preschool. And I heard so many people in these presentations and the webinars talking about behavior as an impetus, meaning that a private school or a private early start program can deny access to children who have behavioral issues. And they don't all have to take them. I think we, as a state, and the obligation as a state agency, is to support the individuals trying to do the work in the community. But if the data is not coming out of the obligation for the state to create this equal access, then it's not happening, and people are making excuses, and it's just it's not going to continue. Because I have to strongly object, and I'm just one person, but there are a lot of people out there like me who understand what's going on. And I think that's my greatest concern, as the state has no real effective encouragement to allow access to all children. And therefore, we're not punishing anyone, but the state has not opened up a new Head Start Center. And they only have the one, and they have the partnership with the other organization that I only found one that had data. And the data is real because we're just measuring. We have an opportunity to change behaviors for children before 5, before they get to the schoolhouse, before they're doing the wrong thing. And we're not even talking about it in a real way. And I guess I'm just getting frustrated because I understand my son they said severely mental retarded and communication handicap, that he would not benefit from public education. And I committed my whole life to going back to school with my youngest son. He graduated with that one-on-one aid, a laptop, and the superintendent and everybody in special ed came. And even Michael Rosenberg, who helped support. And just the mere understanding that all children can learn. It's what they learn. And we need to make sure that they're learning the right things so that we can have a better nation. Build back better, y'all. That's all I can say. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Rachel, I think you had a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to just ask for, so maybe we have more direction next time as well. Because I fully agree with what you're saying, Darlene, about access, and it's one of the greatest barriers. But I'm just not clear on do you want to see targets for the subgroups? Like, is that an option? Is it something, because I'm just trying to focus on what these targets are that we are setting. And while access is the largest, barrier to education for these young children, I just don't know if that's what you want to see, if that's something that we could do in this group next time.
Yeah, it's actually access, because the number of children.
But this group's not about access.
It's the strong starts. I mean, everybody in this room knows that what Tyrone Thompson did before he passed away was those 4th graders all met the same NAEP standards. So they still had the same access, but we're not giving all children those access rights. And behavior is the impetus. So how special education deals with the transition of behavior. It's about learning the skill and gathering the tools so that the children are ready for circle time and that they're not hitting each other, and they're not doing inappropriate things. But all these things happen when people are left to their own understanding. And this is, hey, it's real. We have to be responsible for that own understanding.
I would agree. I understand your point about the access, Darlene. I think what Rachel is trying to clarify is that what we're doing here today is part of the process, right? It is creating those targets for the end result, and knowing that there is a lot of steps that we need to take, not only to provide the opportunities to all students to have these programs available to them, but to improve the programs themselves so that those types of issues can be addressed within those programs. And I know that foundation has been set early on with Sherry doing the work, and then later with Dana doing the work, and Kat will continue to do that. And that's where I was sort of expressing that growth. There's the providing the opportunities, and then there's supporting and helping the districts across the state provide quality programs that do address all of those issues for students. So there's several issues that we haven't even gotten to yet that are part of this process as well. And that's, we need to set the targets, but after that, there's a lot of work to be done to improve and get us to meet those targets, right? And hopefully exceed those targets. And that involves creating the opportunities and having the programs available to students so that they can be part of them. And it's having quality programs and the state can support the districts in creating those quality programs. And yes, addressing the needs so that all children are ready to enter kindergarten and able to access learning the way that they need to from that early age on. Because we know that the earlier that we support them, the more likely they are to be in inclusive settings as they move through. And that is our goal in our office, is to provide those opportunities early on and to not stop the train either. Our concern is that we provide these opportunities in preschool and kindergarten, and then all of a sudden it changes. Our goal is to continue that opportunity past these grade levels on through their entire education program. And yes, we have work to do. So just to be mindful of everybody's time, I don't want to continue to move forward with too much information because I know there are people that have had to leave, and we want to honor that they're part of this group as well. So I would ask, if you have specific asks for data that you want to see at the next meeting, that you would put that in the chat now so that we can acknowledge that and make sure that we bring that to the next meeting. We will send out the information that was presented today so that you can review it thoroughly before we have the next meeting. And we'll sort of try to anticipate some of the ways to present the data on the other indicators moving forward so that you have that broad spectrum of all of what's taking place in these charts, if that makes sense, so that we can better meet those data needs up front.
Okay, thank you very much.
So under the IFC, whatever that committee is that does early start and Head Start, can you hear me? I just want to know where that data is because for whatever reason, Early Start, Head Start, and Child Care is separate from Clark County School District. And when they separate that data, these people are working too independent. It needs to be combined. It's just like I didn't understand how come the Regional Transit Center, the bus doesn't take the high school students to school so the babies can get safely to school and the disabled children can get safely to school. I don't understand the lack of partnerships and commitment to partnerships to make Nevada a real, a wonderful place for the families. I don't understand that.
Darlene, we did just partner with RTC for our older high school kids. There was a whole presentation. I'll send that to you separately. But here in Clark County, we did make that partnership already, and I hear it's very successful. And Darlene, I hear every word that you're saying. And I think if you have further data questions, they said earlier, and I sent it to you in a message, that the Office of Accountability may have that data, because I know that we are having trouble accessing it on the Nevada Ready website.
And if you have any questions about requesting that, Catherine could help you as well with requesting data from Adam, our assessment accountability office as well. But again, I want to be mindful of the time and respect that this group is talking about preschool data. And we will continue this conversation in our next meeting. And again, we thank you all for your input and your time. We know that you'll spend additional time reviewing this information outside of this meeting, and we really appreciate your thoughtfulness and attentiveness to this project for the NDE.
Thank you all. See you on Wednesday.
Kat, you can stop recording.
Bye, ladies. Have a great day. Thank you so much for tolerating me. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah. Yeah, record.
Oh my goodness. What was I thinking? Let me shrink this. Stop this share. I'm going to share again.
And I'm Darlene Anderson. I moved to Nevada about 3 years ago. And I'm Darlene Anderson. I moved to Nevada about 3 years ago.
Salute.
And I'm Darlene Anderson. I moved to Nevada about 3 years ago. Darlene Anderson. I moved to Nevada about 3 years ago. Darlene Anderson.
Trying to shrink this window. My goodness, a little busy here. Do it this way. Every day. Looking for Microsoft Teams. Come out here. For a second.
I'll share the screen.
That'd be there 3 times. Let's read this, and I'm probably just leave it alone. After a while. Nothing. Can't help me with anything. I was looking, trying to think at the same time. It doesn't work.
State Performance Plan Federal Fiscal Year 2020-2025. Welcome and Introduction Strong Start, SS Indicators Workgroup Members representing, parents, checkmark Darlene Anderson, checkmark Rachel Nelson, checkmark Danny Drummond asterisk, checkmark Valerie Wright, checkmark Robin Kincaid.
Don't want to. Got it.
What is the SPPAPR? The Individuals with Disabilities Education Act IDEA requires each state to develop a state performance plan annual performance report, SPPAPR, that evaluates the state's efforts to implement the requirements and purposes of the IDEA and describes how the state will improve its implementation. The Office of Special Education Programs, OSEP, uses information from the SPPAPR, information obtained through monitoring visits, and any other public information to annually determine if the state meets the requirements and purposes of IDEA, needs assistance in implementing the requirements of IDEA, needs intervention in implementing the requirements of IDEA, or needs substantial intervention in implementing the requirements of IDEA. State Performance Plan, SPP, includes indicators that measure child and family outcomes and other indicators that measure compliance with the requirements of the IDEA. A state is required to submit a State Performance Plan, SPP, with measurable and rigorous targets at least every 6 years. Each year, states must report against the SPP targets in an annual performance report, APR. The fine print. The Office of Special Education and Rehabilitative Services (OSERS) is committed to improving early childhood, educational, and employment outcomes and to raising expectations for all people with disabilities, their families, their communities, and the nation. In September 2018, OSERS released its framework, which prioritizes rethinking all aspects of how OSERS serves infants, toddlers, children and youth with disabilities, and their families. It highlights OSER's commitment to support states in their work to raise expectations and improve outcomes for individuals with disabilities, provide states the flexibility they need to implement their programs in conformity with the IDEA, and partner with parents, individuals with disabilities, and diverse stakeholders. OSEP began the process of rethinking all its systems, policies, and requirements that could be barriers to children with disabilities receiving a free appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. In doing so, OSEP operationalized its framework on its current system for providing IDEA-related supports to states, and for monitoring IDEA implementation in states. Results-Driven Accountability, RDA. RDA, introduced in 2012, consists of three components: the SPPAPR, IDEA Section 616D determinations, and differentiated monitoring and support. OSEP is rethinking RDA to ensure it is in the best position to support the improvement of early childhood and educational outcomes and raise expectations for children and youth with disabilities, and their families. OSEP acknowledges that states, local educational agencies, and parents know best the needs of their children, and the systems and structures used to support them. Therefore, OSEP held 18 listening sessions, and accepted written input, on the current SPPAPR and suggestions for improvement. The proposed revisions to the SPPAPR are responsive to stakeholder input and provide our state and local partners with as much flexibility and support as possible so they can ensure that the needs of children with disabilities are being met. Finally, these proposed revisions take necessary steps to elevate parent voice in special education and related services provided under IDEA Part B. Parents play a critical role in their children's education. The family is a child's first educator and is best equipped to make decisions. Therefore, consistent with the Secretary's priorities and OSER's Rethink framework, OSEP is proposing to require states to examine parent participation rates in surveys, in addition to the representativeness of those participating, to ensure that each state is receiving quality, actionable information from the most and varied parent voices as possible. The information families provide is critical to helping states evaluate the effectiveness of their systems. It is this parent and state partnership that will ensure raised expectations and improve outcomes for each child with a disability and their families. SPPAPR, Section 616B1A of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA or Act, requires that, not later than 1 year after the date of enactment of IDEA Improvement Act of 2004, each state have in place an IDEA Part B SPP that evaluates the state's efforts to implement the requirements and purposes of IDEA Part B and describes how the state will improve such implementation. IDEA Section 616B1C requires each state to review its SPP at least once every 6 years. Consistent with IDEA Section 616B2C, 2, each state must report annually to the public on the performance of each local educational agency located in the state on the targets in the state's performance plan, and to the Secretary on the state's performance under the SPP, and APR. Indicators of the Act. 1. The SPP is comprised of quantifiable indicators T priority areas. The provision of a free appropriate public education, FAPE, in the least restrictive environment, LRE. State exercise of its general supervisory authority including child find, effective monitoring, the use of resolution sessions and mediation, and a system of transition services as defined in IDEA Sections 60234 and 637A9. Disproportionate representation of racial and ethnic groups in special education and related services, to the extent the representation is the result of an appropriate identification. The SPP also includes indicators that are not specifically required by Section IDEA 616A3, such as the indicators related to suspension and expulsion and parent involvement, that address areas critical to ensuring improved educational results and functional outcomes for students with disabilities. See IDEA Section 616A4. Targets, improvement. Pursuant to IDEA Section 616B1A, the SPP must include a description of how the state will improve its implementation of IDEA. Information regarding slippage where the targets are not met. Section 80.40B2 of the Education Department General Administrative Regulations, or EDGAR, required that the state's APRs include brief information on the reasons for slippage if the established objectives, i.e., targets, were not met. This section of EDGAR was replaced by the Uniform Guidance provision in 2 CFR paragraph 200.328B22, which requires that, unless other collections are approved by OMB, the state's APRs include brief information on the reasons why the state did not meet its established goals, i.e., targets, if appropriate. The department proposes to maintain the requirement in the current instructions, approved by OMB in 2012, that states must include an explanation of slippage and indicators where the state did not meet its target.
Trying to see what else is important here. All right, here we go. Take this from that much. And we'll read this.
Indicator topic target baseline changes indicator 6.8-C preschool environments NV sets target baseline updated. Yes will no longer include 5-year-old students with disabilities who are enrolled in kindergarten. New measurement must provide baseline data and set 6-year targets for % of children receiving services in the home setting indicator 7.8-C preschool outcomes NV sets target baseline updated. No, the method for measuring indicator will not change indicator 11 child find OSEP sets target 100% baseline updated. No, the method for measuring indicator will not change indicator 12 early childhood transition OSEP sets target 100% baseline updated. No, the method for measuring indicator will not change indicator 6.8 preschool environments, % receiving majority of special education and related services in regular early childhood program. Indicator 6.B preschool environments, % attending separate special education class, separate school, or residential facility. Indicator 6.C preschool environments, receiving special education and related services in the home. Indicator 7.A preschool outcomes, % improve positive social emotional skills. Indicator 7.B preschool outcomes, % improve acquisition and use of knowledge and skills. Indicator 7.C preschool outcomes, % improve use of appropriate behaviors to meet their needs. Indicator 11 child find evaluation within 45 school days. Indicator 12 early childhood transition IEP developed by third birthday for Part 100 transfers. What do targets and target setting mean? Targets, checkmark. Targets identify a level of progress or performance expected for an objective, checkmark. Targets should be, checkmark, rooted in and build on past experience when possible, checkmark, both analytically grounded and satisfactory to stakeholders and the public. Target setting refers to the process used to select the target's value, checkmark. A state may use a variety of target setting methods, checkmark. The state must clearly and completely explain the rationale and method. Methods for setting targets, checkmark. Eyeball estimation refers to inspecting data and quickly making an educated guess about the approximate magnitude of relevant statistics, checkmark. Use trend lines to OSEP sets target, 100% baseline updated, no compliance indicator, percent of children who were evaluated within 60 days of receiving parental consent for initial evaluation, or, if the state establishes a time frame within which the evaluation must be conducted, within that time frame. 20 U.S.C. 1416A3B. Data source. Data to be taken from state monitoring or state data system and must be based on actual, not an average, number of days. Indicate if the state has established a timeline and, if so, what is the state's timeline for initial evaluations. Measurement. A. Number of children for whom parental consent to evaluate was received. B. Number of children whose evaluations were completed within 60 days, or state-established timeline. Account for children included in A, but not included in B. Indicate the range of days beyond the timeline when the evaluation was completed and any reasons for the delays.
And after all that, nothing tells you how Nevada's going to collect the data because they really don't do site-based decision making. But it's up to parents to understand that they have to demand the level of outcomes from the public school system because the requirement is on the state to offer an opportunity for every child that is required by law to go through the public education system to have a way of measuring the benefit. And of course, parent involvement is critical, but if you're not giving your child anything by demanding a level of outcomes, this is 2021, soon to be 2022, and everybody has a right to participate. So I encourage you, e-per-regime, out of many, there's one. And out of one, what can I say? But in America, you are only what you believe you are. Y'all have a great day.